open. Dad, can you fix the DVD player, please?
So this is an LG combo hi-fi system that we bought around about 2004, and at the moment we can't open the DVD player, CD player unit. It's got a 3-disc auto changer in there and it's not opening. But before we work on that, let's have a look at the features of this thing and the good and bad points about it. There's a lot to this machine, so let's work our way through its many features. This part here doesn't seem to do anything. It's clipped in, but nothing seems to go on there, because this is the part that opens for the CD DVD auto changer. I wonder if they did have a version with something in there. Looking on the front of this DVD control system, as I say, it does digital DTS surround sound, MP3 from CD and CDRW, and DVD-ROM, DVD video of course, Dolby Digital Pro Logic 2, more of that in a moment, compact disc digital audio of course, and video CD, which not all systems support, and RDS for the FM tuner, so it'll give you station names and the likes, but of course no DAB radio on this. It's way too old. And we have 3-disc auto changer controls here, except they're not working, and you can select all different inputs here: tuner, tape, disc in general, and aux, so it has a line in at the back, and various menus, and there's a remote with this. Let me show you the remote. So here's the remote control, and I have to say it just feels like they've just thrown hundreds of buttons at it. It's not terribly nicely laid out. Yes, okay. But what they've tried to say is these are DVD controls, they're tape controls, they're CD controls. But, you know, it has a lot of features, so it's going to be a little complicated. Maybe they could have done a better job of laying that out. Some things are a little bit quirky, like setting the clock. You sort of press a button here and then press a button here, and it's a little bit quirky. Let me tell you a little about the clock. Actually, it's just quartz. It doesn't use the mains AC frequency to keep time, and in fact when we first got it, the timekeeping was abysmal. It was I think it ran extremely slowly. It was losing like about a minute a day or something. Completely useless. But I didn't want to send it back. It was too much trouble. I think we bought it from Maplin back in the day. I really couldn't be bothered, so I had a look at where the crystal was for the timer. I think it was on the front, and I couldn't get to it without doing a major strip down, which I wasn't about to do on a brand new piece of kit, but I could get to where the crystal was soldered in, and I just, let's try something, soldered in another crystal across the contacts to the crystal that's in there, a 32.768 kilohertz watch crystal, and that fixed it. The timekeeping is now perfectly tolerable. I think it loses time, or does it gain time? I forget which, but it's tiny. It's just maybe a second a day or something. It's absolutely fine. So that was a good workaround. I also, looking at the crystal, the chip that crystal was on, I slapped a great big capacitor across its power rails, just in the hope that it would make a little bit more tolerant of short power cuts. I don't know if that really worked, but it's there. Right, so, you know, what do you do when you're an electronic engineer and you buy something that's faulty? Do you send it back or do you fix it? So I fixed it. Right, other features. We don't want to go through every single feature here. There's just too many. It's got mic inputs. I think that's because it does karaoke. Never bothered with that. I want to briefly mention the cassette decks, which we've barely ever used. So these are basically brand new cassette decks. And I think, so it says tape 1 play and tape 2 record and play. And looking at the heads, that looks like, so that's a play only, and I think it's single direction, whereas tape 2, it looks like that's auto reverse, doesn't it? The one that is record and play. Yes, that's auto reverse. It's got a flip over type head and 2 pinch rollers and capstans. But you could count on one hand the amount of times either of these cassette decks have ever been used. The cassette decks lack, as was typical of the time and onwards, they don't have Dolby, which is a terrible shame, because to me that is the difference between a cassette deck that's useful and it isn't, so I don't use it. Auto reverse, yes, there we go. Anything here, or is that just a fake thing at the front? It might be a fake thing. Okay, or you can see spots there for adjusting the tape azimuth, I think. So why it's got two when this one's play only and not auto reverse is unknown. It might be that there was a version that had twin auto reverse decks. They did used to do lots of different versions of these machines and tweak the specs on them, so it might be there was a version with an auto reverse on this side as well. So as it says, Dolby Digital and Pro Logic 2 and DTS, but there's a big failing here. That Dolby Digital is only true of playing DVDs on the unit, of course, because there would be no way of getting the digital input in unless you had an optical in from some other device. So there's no Dolby Digital for the auxiliary input. You'd expect that probably, but you would expect the Pro Logic to work on an analog input from the auxiliary, but it doesn't. So this is presently connected to a Sky Q mini box, and you'd expect to get Pro Logic audio from the rear speakers on this, and you don't. And I think that's because all the Dolby Digital processing is done earlier on. It's done in the DVD part of the equipment. It's not done in the amplifier. So there was no way for it to take in the analog input and apply Pro Logic to it. So that's a disappointment, and I know one person who bought one of these who was really disappointed, and he got rid of it immediately because it didn't do that. Let's go around the back and have a look at what it does at the back. Oh look, it's got functions for normal dubbing, CD sync, and high-speed dubbing and repeating, and again features I've never used. It says play mode and demo, so obviously it's got a demo mode for when it's in the shop. Around the back then we have a left and right and front and rear plus center speaker, so that's outputs for 5 speakers plus a low level output, I think, for subwoofer, which we've never used, but I would like to if I can get a small subwoofer to go with this. There's aux in, so that's what's connected to the Skybox. Let's look at these outputs. These are important. We've got composite video out, but why would you use that? Yeah, yuck. S-video, okay, that's good. TVs of the vintage of about 2004 may have had S-video inputs, so that would have been okay. No HDMI, of course, because that wasn't really a thing terribly popular, I don't think, at that vintage. An optical out, so you could get your Dolby Digital from that and feed that to a amplifier that does Dolby Digital if you wanted. But really, what it needed was optical in, not out. And biggest failing here, no RGB, no SCART, no YUV, no HDMI. So the highest quality output you've got is S-video, and lots of TVs don't even support that. Now, a few months ago I featured a device that I was given, which was made by JVC for use with their Super VHS machines, and to allow those to connect to TVs that didn't have S-video in and only had RGB, and so it's an S-video to RGB converter. So I've got that set up for this, so we can go S-video to RGB, and the TV I'm using with this does fortunately support RGB. If you didn't have that facility, you could probably buy today, I've not looked, an S-video to HDMI converter. If so, that would give you a good quality output from there. But composite, you don't want to use that with DVD. It's not going to look very good. Right. One of the things you might be able to hear is it's sort of making a whirring noise because there's a fan for the amplifier. The amplifier is quite powerful. In fact, it's generating a fair bit of heat right now. I can feel the heat coming out of there. But it is a bit noisy. And when you switch it on, it starts really loud, and then it starts to slow down a little bit. I think also it's probably a bit dusty. It's 20 years old, so we'll need to clean that out. So that can be something of a nuisance, that noisy fan. Okay, we've looked at the machine. Let's take it apart. I'll probably give it a quick clean before I bother you with it, and then we'll find out what's wrong with this DVD player. Okay, it's described then as an LG DVD mini home cinema system. Right. It would be more home cinema, of course, if it applied Pro Logic to the auxiliary inputs. Let's get it apart and see, well, what's inside in terms of all the equipment in there, and specifically, of course, this DVD auto changer. Every time you touch this thing, the cassette doors open. It's a bit of a nuisance like that. Okay, I've just taken it outside actually and blew it out with this dust blower thing. Very handy this. I've featured this on a YouTube short I did recently. Of course, this thing's got a fan in it, so it draws air in. There's the fan, and it blows it through the heat sinks for the audio output amplifier, and that exhausts out the back. But of course, that means it just acts like a vacuum cleaner and is always vacuuming your house out, so it gets very, very dusty. Oh, and when I was cleaning it, I lost my laser warning, so I have to see where that's supposed to go and stick it back. Let's have a little look at what's going on in here. First thing we see, which is nice to see, is an absolutely enormous transformer. So that's a little bit of quality there. You can see why it's such a heavy piece of kit. It does definitely weigh something, and a lot of it's that transformer and the heat sinks for the amplifier. So it is decently powerful. It's got links here for setting 110, 120, 240, 230. So it's set to 230 volts. And there's an option there for having a relay, but it's not installed, and a transformer or choke in there. Okay, we've got a large panel at the front, which includes the clock and I think the sort of the brains of the thing. So one of the CPUs is going to be on the front there. So I wonder if we can find my clock mod. Should we have a look for that? So I think you can see just there where I've added a 32.768 kilohertz crystal, and you can see why I added it to the back of the PCB, because getting this whole PCB out would have been something you didn't want to do on a brand new piece of equipment, let's put it that way. So yeah, that was a good bodge, that worked. Other major boards then, as well as that main front PCB, this one looks like it does the DVD operation, including driving the mechanics of it. There's another board here for laser, I should think, and there's various switches and what have you, motors, and then I think probably this will do all the Dolby Digital decoding as well on that one, which is why there's some big silicon in there. Let's get some light in there. So that board goes the full width of the machine. There's a lot on that one. And there's a big board at the back. Let's have a look at that from the other side. Audio processing, I think a lot of that's audio processing. I do like the nice star earth there. There's a lot of good labelling on this board. You know, they didn't have to put that much effort into making it so that you can see what the various signals are, but they have done, which is good stuff. More excellent signal labelling on these connectors at the front here. And moving up, we've got one of the motors here, which could well be the motor that we're going to be interested in, actually. And remember I was mentioning that panel at the front looked like it could do something. So there's this here along the front. Definitely looks like it could be a feature that this one doesn't have. I think there's another motor there, so we need to work out what motor is supposed to do what, why it won't eject. Perhaps we can just switch it on, press eject, and which is that one, and see what it does or doesn't do. Right, power up, switch it on. Let's press disk eject. Absolutely nothing. It's not like it's just a slipping motor, is it? It's not doing anything at all. Nothing at all. Can I free it up? Just wiggling it and jiggling it to see if I can free up whatever motor's not spinning. I'm assuming it's a mechanical fault, of course. It could be electronic, in which case we're in terrible trouble. This whole top mechanism is held in by screws here and I think here. So we may end up having to take the mechanism out, but I'd like to avoid that if we can. I think I've worked out a little bit about motors. So this one here is going to be the spindle motor, so that is not relevant to the mechanical problems we're seeing. I think this one is probably for rotating the disc, because it can do that whether it's ejected or not. So I think that must be a separate motor to the eject function. And this motor, therefore, I think is eject, which operates on a rack under here. But you might say, well, surely then it would allow us to flip the discs on this. So if I select DVD, I should be able to flip the discs even if the eject motor is not working. And we're not. So either we have an electrical fault that's preventing either the motors from running, or it's failed to initialize and so it's just not working. Though it should probably come up with a more intelligent error message or something. But I think I still need to look at whether there's a mechanical fault here. Well, can I get to the motor? If I can get to the motor connector there, I can see if we've got voltage on that. That should be easy enough, shouldn't it? Let's do that first. What I thought I could do, perhaps, is with the unit powered down, just see if I can operate that motor. But when unplugging the wire from the circuit board, I managed to snap the wire off the motor. So I've got to fix that, which is a little bit fiddly to get to. So that's my first problem now. Can I get my soldering iron in there to reconnect this wire? Oh, caused my own problem. No, I'm not going to be able to get to that wire easily on the motor. And anyway, I think I need to get the mechanism out to really do this work. So out comes the mechanism. Let's see how hard that is. Okay, the back was very easy to take off, but the front might be harder. Depends if we have to take the entire machine to pieces at the front. I hope not. Feels like this is hanging us up, but how do we get that off? Alright, let's see if we've got sufficiently good access to that motor connection now at least. The bit of room I've now got on the deck, I think I can get to the positive terminal of the motor here. So I can resolder that. Alright, in the first instance, let's just see what happens if we apply a voltage to that motor. Does it eject, or is that the disc spinning motor? We'll find out. What voltage? I don't know, but I'm going to guess at about 5 or 6 volts, something in that area. Okay, let's try that, see if anything happens. Right. So the first thing we know is that there is not a mechanical problem with this motor or its drive belt. Well, maybe the drive belt actually does feel a bit slack on that. So let's change out for a better belt. That clearly has had better days. But that is not going to be our whole problem. Well, I don't think so. Unless, of course, it does try to spin that at the start and do a shuffle, and it's failing to do that. So it's a possibility. Anyway, let's start by changing that belt. Right, I've refitted a couple of screws at the front there just to try and get this roughly correct so that it will run in and out without colliding with things. No, it's still colliding. What's going on? This is how you're supposed to take the front off. Look, that started to come off then. Okay, well, it's back on place. But that just pops off. But obviously that could be quite tricky. Right, so why is it not allowing me to close it now? Something wasn't quite right in place. Let's fit another screw at the back, I think. Get everything reasonably straight and tidy. That'll do for now. So the mechanism should be able to open and close. Let's just try that. Now it's stuck on something else. It keeps jamming on the way in. Doesn't feel quite right, that. As it was going in, something was colliding with the bottom and I had to keep lifting it up. But the screws are in now. Let's see if I can do a full eject on it. Right. But can I get it to go back in, or will it jam again? Jamming. Unless I give it a... So there's something not quite right there. What do we make of that? Well, I'm going to, just for a moment, what I'd like to do is eject it a little bit, and then we can see if when I power it up it tries to drive in. Even if I just go that far. Right, let's reconnect the motor, switch the unit on, and see if during its initialization sequence it drives that in. Okay, I think I've done that. So let's switch it on and see if that tries to drive in or out at all, because it's free to move there. I know it does keep jamming in different places, but right now it's free to move in that area. If it tries to move at all, then we know that we have drive to the motor. Switch it on, welcome. Okay, it's jamming, but it was trying to drive the motor. Yeah, it's still jamming. Right, so we know that we have motor drive, though we're having problems with it now jamming up somewhere on the way in. I can maneuver it back into place, but I don't know why I'm having to. Let's see though if I can get it to eject at this point under its own control. Right, open close. Just says disk read, it's ignoring the open close button. And again it's jamming. I seem to have taken it off the... Oh, I've done something wrong now, because that's slopping about without driving the motor, so... Oh dear. Made it worse. Something's disconnected from something, because that is not driving this. What's supposed to happen, I think, is when this comes in, it goes in far enough that it actually engages with this big gear here, and then that brings the laser up. But that should be out at the moment. It's hard to know if our problems are electrical, mechanical, or both. And I suspect it's both. Right, I'm going to take this part off, gain access to the motor, and see if I can work out why it's mistimed, and maybe change the belt for slightly bigger belt, or maybe a slightly thinner belt, because I think the belt that's in there may be overloading it. It may be that the motor is fairly marginal. So let's take this off. There may be some timing issues with this, and maybe need to put this back in exactly the right sequence. So I'm just checking to see if there are any timing markers on here. There aren't. No timing markers on that. It's done. Its location is done by these slots. You see, so it works out what disc is where by these slots and an opto sensor somewhere. So that can just be plonked back any which way. But that doesn't help us terribly much, does it? So that is driven by this motor. There's nothing wrong with that, but that motor is also not being driven. There's another hint. Oh, there we are. There's our opto sensor. I'll make sure that's free of dust. You never know. That might not be helping its cause. And there must be some opto sensors for this too. Well, there's a switch here. Can you see that? And another switch here. Okay, I think the drive belt I've installed here is too small compared to the original. So I'm going to try to find just a very slightly larger belt. Yeah, I think that's part of the problem here, is it's overloading it. It's just the motor's marginal in terms of power, and so it's slightly heavier. It's getting a heavier load as a result of the thicker belt. Okay, I fitted a thin belt here. It's the correct size, but it's too thin. It'll have to do for now. I need to investigate why this thing is crashing, and I can feel it on this side. So let's investigate what's colliding over here. It feels like a little nudge upwards, and it's clear. There's something over here having a collision. See? What could that be? This collision problem is something to do with it. So from that point in, it should be able to drive in, but it keeps crashing into something on this side. No, it's not. Why wouldn't you know it? Okay, now it's not colliding with whatever it was colliding with. So if I switch it on, it might drive in. Let's try it. Switch it on, and I think it'll try to drive in. Okay, that belt's slipping, but it did drive in. So we still need to sort the belt out. But on that one occasion, it did succeed in driving in. But it's not driving the motor and lens assembly up. And I don't think that's just due to a slipping motor. I don't think it's driving up. Okay, we're going to have to... I don't know what we're going to do about the belt. I think temporarily I'm going to have to try to just boil this belt to try to get it a little bit better before we obviously replace it. And maybe that'll help us work on the rest of the mechanism. So, I mean, it's never a solution to boil belts, but it can help for debugging purposes. So let's boil that in hot water for several minutes and see what happens. Boiled this belt, but it's still not good. You can see that it's not sitting flat properly. It's kind of got a twist to it, and it's still got a bulge in one corner, so it's not gone back into shape. I will measure that and set about ordering one. But before I do that, I think I'll try a little bit more heat using a hot air gun. This is set to 100 Celsius, so it's no hotter than boiling water. So maybe if I just try a bit of that, it might help get it back into shape. What do you say I wind it up just a tiny bit more? 125 I'm going to set it to. So it's a little bit above boiling water. Try not to burn my fingers. No, it still has a twist to it. Not great, but hopefully it's got just a little bit better shape to it for at least helping us to continue to work on this machine. In the meantime, let's measure it. Okay, so I think its inside circumference is probably around 102 millimeters probably, and the square cross section, I think it's probably a 2 millimeter cross section belt. That belt from the cheap nasty kit was just too thin, I think. Okay, let's see what happens if we power it up now. No, it's just spinning. The motor's just spinning. So we really do have to solve this belt problem before we can go any further. I'll try cleaning the motor pulley. But if I now press eject, will I even hear the motor try to eject? No. It's saying disk read, and it's not switching to eject. Let's power cycle it again. Select DVD. Listen for the motor. Nothing. It's not making sense. The motor should drive regardless of the belt condition. Now press eject or open close and we should hear the motor run. And it should switch to open. And it's not. It's upset because I've taken this off and so it can't see the correct signals from here. Okay, well that's an easy thing to check, isn't it? We can put that back. But I don't think so, because if any, it could have been parked at any of these points where there are no flags. So I don't see that being anything to do with it. The other thing I could do is just stick a disc in there, just so it's got something to read. My thought is that maybe with a disc in there, it might try to put the mechanism, motor and laser up. I don't think so. I don't think it could if it tried, because I think that's still slipping too much, that belt. Oh, I've got a mistake there. I've got that assembled wrong. So that's a small error, but I don't think that's causing our problem. No, that had no bearing on it. I'll try a little bit of deoxit into these switches, just in case they're giving it some sort of weird response. It seems really odd that the motor does work, because it will drive in. Right, it's fully home, but it hasn't closed the lens and motor assembly for the CD. It should have driven further, and it didn't. And it just stuck on disk read. Do you think it's failing to detect that it's got the sled all the way in? Which switch does that? Right, this is the out switch, this one. So I think this must be the in switch here. And it also is laser mechanism up. Does both of those. Right, it's possible to get that disconnected from here. And that's helpful in this case because, right, that's exactly what this switch does. Yes, this switch here is two positions. It says sled not fully home, sled home, and laser assembly up. So we should be able to meter that. I don't know what the pinout is, but we should be able to see different conditions for those two positions. So let's do that. Actually, I think we might have the schematic for that board, so let's look that up and actually be sure that the switch is correct. I've just noticed something in the instructions which is worth trying. It says if your machine is acting up, you can give it a hard reset. Okay, so we'll put a screwdriver in there that I can bridge them with. I don't know if it has to be powered up during this reset. I would imagine so, but the instructions seem to imply that it isn't. It says, if you wish to operate the reset jump wire, it is necessary to unplug the power cord. Surely it needs to be powered up, otherwise how would it know? Well, I've shorted them together. Let's short them together when it's powered up as well. Tell you what I'll do is I'll briefly set the clock to something. Right, and then if I short these, hopefully I'll see that clock reset. Yes, that worked. That worked. Now maybe I switch it off and on. Maybe that's what it's getting at. Alright, so we've done a full reset. Switch it on. Alright, let's try these switches. Well, after searching through the schematics, it turns out that this board is not listed anywhere in them. But I can access that switch and operate it in both directions. So let's see if I can make some sense of it. There are, how many pads on it? How many connections? 5. So let's see if I can make any sense. It might be that, I don't know what the pinout could be. It's anybody's guess, isn't it? So let's just see if we can find out. So trying the N2 pins, nothing. Let's go to the other end. And try the switch both ways. Whoops. Okay. So when I push the switch that way, the N2 pins are made. Right, these N2 pins make when that goes across. Good. Move along. So I'm going to have to try every combination. Right, so that end contact seems to be made with multiple pins when the switch is to that direction. I think these are common all the time. So this end switch here should be made when we bring the switch. Those end points on that side should be made when we pull it this way. And they are. That switch is working. Right, we really need to test this switch as well. So I'm going to have to see if I can find the connections here. Okay, look, I found the switch for fully out. It may have another contact on the switch as well, which is probably fully in. So let's detect that as well. Now there we go. So that's fully in and that's fully out. So I've tested both positions of both switches. Pity really, because that kind of, would have been the right kind of fault to cause this kind of symptom. But nope, it's not the switches. Thing is, when you switch it on and go to DVD, it sits on disc read and never gets beyond that, even when I select open. Now why would it get stuck on disc read? Well, perhaps it's doing a laser measurement and the laser is low. So it just sits there, unable to go any further. Distinct possibility that, isn't it? But the service manual just doesn't really help that sort of thing. There are some flowcharts on the service manual, but they don't mention disc read. Does the sled move to the inner side when it is at the outer position at switch on? And yes, it does try to do that. I know we've got a little bit of trouble with the belt, but yes. Do not put the disc in, it says. Does the optical lens have movement searching for focus? We're looking here for movement of the laser focusing, which is here. Okay, we can do that to make sure that the laser slides along, but we want to see, and if you can see it there, can you see the lens there? Does the lens shift and attempt to do a focus? Let's switch it on and see what happens. I'm hearing a funny noise. What's that funny noise? Do that again. Does the lens try to focus? No. No, it doesn't, does it? Optical lens says, well, I think that's where it stopped. It didn't attempt to focus, did it? This should have shifted. Optical lens has movement for searching focus. No. Proper FOSO outputs to motor driver. So we'd have to check connections on the laser motor driver, which presumably, switch this off, is on the other end of this cable here. Alright, let's do that test again. If the flowchart is correct, does the sled move to the inner position when it is at the outer position at switch on? Here we go. Does the tray move inside when it's not at closed position? Yes. Does the sled move to the inner position? Oh, that's this bit. That's the laser sled. Yeah, we saw that go. That worked. Yes. So that did. Do not put the disc in. Close the tray. Has the optical lens, does it have a movement for focus? But bearing in mind it doesn't go up. And maybe it won't if it doesn't go up. It's difficult to know what the sequence of events is. Should this be driven up and then it tries to laser search? Or is it going to do something even when it's down? Oh well, let's try it again. Just watch that lens. Okay, so that's the sled. This is the... It's got stuck again, hasn't it? Right, it's not trying to drive that assembly up and is not trying to operate the focus motor or the focus of the laser. It's not doing anything. So proper FOSO, I don't know what that means, outputs to motor driver, which means taking this board off, way out of my comfort zone. I'm no expert on DVD players. So it looks like from the description we're looking at a fault on this board or the laser assembly itself, neither of which would be easy to repair. I'm afraid I'm going to have to temporarily give up, but I'm not necessarily giving up forever. I will replace that belt for starters, and if anybody out there has got to scrap one of these machines or is an expert on DVD repair, then please let me know and fill me in on what should be the sequence here. Should that attempt to operate the focus even before it's gone up to meet a disc and before there's a disc in there as part of its switch on sequence? From what I remember, I think I've seen DVD players do that, so I think it probably is the case. But for the time being, I'm going to have to reassemble this and just carry on using it as an amplifier until we get some inspiration. Well, after some interesting videos I've done lately on N1700 and similar machines and the tape polishing equipment, this was supposed to be a quick repair and turned out not to be. If you are an expert on DVD player repair, perhaps you can give me some inspiration, and I'm going to order that drive belt anyway. In the meantime, I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.
Did you fix it, Dad?
No, sorry, not this time.
I thought you could fix everything.